I would like to help you understand the cast diagram completely, because I've picked this up. Many learners struggle with this or know it but don't really understand it. So let's take it step by step. So first of all, I'm going to draw the three different trig graphs that we can look at in grade 11. So this is a sine graph, and then the cos graph, and then the tan graph. So this is 90, 180, 270, 360. Let's define the first quadrant. So between 0 and 90 it's the first quadrant. Between 90 and 180 it's the second quadrant. Between 90 to 70 it's the third quadrant. And between 270 and 360 it's the fourth quadrant. Now the cast diagram, you can see corresponding first, second, third, and fourth quadrants. Now let's look at the first quadrant for all three graphs and ask the question, in the first quadrant, which graphs are positive? Between the sine graph, the cos graph, and the tan graph. And you will clearly see that the sine graph is positive. The cos graph is positive, and also the tan graph. So all three of our graphs are positive in the first quadrant. Therefore, we're going to use the letter A to symbolize all three that are positive, all of them. Now let's look at the second quadrant. Is the sine graph positive? Yes. Is the cos graph positive? No, it's negative. And the tan graph as well. So the only one that's positive in the second quadrant is the sine graph. The third quadrant, you'll see the sine graph is negative. The cos graph is negative, but the tan graph is positive. Therefore, we put a symbol T. Now let's look at the fourth quadrant. The sine graph is negative. The cos graph is positive. And the tan graph is negative. Therefore, we have the letter C there. And that's where we get the word cast diagram from. Let's see how we can apply this now with calculations or just understanding the concept. So we're going to take an angle that's equal to theta, and theta is smaller than 90 degrees. So on the cast diagram, we can represent it as theta right over there. Now, a fascinating thing happens that if we work around the numbers 180 degrees and 360 degrees, there is specific patterns that repeats with a cast diagram. For instance, the value that we will have if we've got an angle theta will be exactly the same if we move over to 180 minus theta. To give us that position. Now just to indicate what will happen over here. So this is theta. And over there, 180 minus theta, as you can clearly see, it will give us the same value for theta. So that's an interesting thing. So, and that's how our reduction and the different trig ratios will work. So over here, if we've got theta, the value that you get for in the first quadrant, you'll have the exact same value if you have 180 minus theta. Now for the sine graph, if you have 180 plus theta, you'll get the same value except it will be a negative. So in this quadrant, we have 180 plus theta, and you'll get the same value except it will be negative for the sine graph. Let's move over to the fourth quadrant. If you take 360 minus theta, so that's theta 360 minus theta, you again get the same value, but it will be a negative than what we've got in the first quadrant. So we're going to take this exact same pattern and apply it to the cost graph as well. So let's look at any specific value. So let's say that is theta. Whatever value we got there will be the same if we say 360 minus theta. You can see it's in the fourth quadrant. So the same value that we would get in the first quadrant we'll get in the fourth quadrant. And it's indicated there with the C as well. But for the second and the third quadrant, we'll get the same magnitude except it will be a negative number. So the second and the third quadrant. And you can see that in the graph as well. Let's look at the tan graph. So let's say this is theta. Whatever we get in the first quadrant, we will get the exact same thing if we say 180 plus. So hence tan being positive in the first and the third quadrant. And if we say 180 minus, we'll get the same magnitude except it will be a negative number, and the same in the fourth quadrant, it's a negative number. And it's important to note here that the period of a tan graph is 180 degrees. So whatever you have in this part will just be repeated again in the third and the fourth quadrant. So it's clear to see it in this way.